Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast on this Wednesday. I appreciate you guys joining me today. Please subscribe to the podcast everywhere podcasts are found. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please subscribe to the YouTube and Rumble channel. We would really love to see you there, particularly Rumble. I really want to grow that channel. You could help me out by subscribing, liking, rating, reviewing right there. Also, follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show, wherever I am on social media. And again, I just want to ask you to support our sponsor, MyPillow. Mike Lindell, fabulous company, fabulous patriot that is fighting for election integrity, that is currently being bullied by the FBI. You can help him out. You can help this podcast out, and you can get a good night's rest by going to mypillow.com, using the promo code Carl, and buying yourself some Giza Dream Sheets that are currently on sale, or some Percale bed sheets, normally selling for $39.90 or $89.98. I'm sorry, for a queen size, now on sale for $39.98. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on that radio listener square, enter the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L. Take advantage of that, buy some early Christmas presents, or you can give them a call at 1-800-858-0263, 1-800-858-0263. Please use the promo code Carl. Listen, I love supporting MyPillow because they provide American jobs, American manufacturing. I wish more stuff was made in America, and I wish we had more entrepreneurs like Mike Lindell. Anyway, God bless you guys for doing that. Now, let me get to the topic of the day. And I got a couple of headlines that were printed out for me by Forgotten Man. Now the Officer Tatum Show used to be the producer of the Larry Elder Show, but is now with the Officer Tatum, since Larry Elder is at the Epic Times. Larry Elder again may be running for president. I'm going to talk about something that Don Lemon said. I want to deal with this because it's going to continue to pop up every election cycle. Fake racism, distort history, revisionist history when it comes to slavery in America. Also, the Woman King. Even the black community is boycotting that. This movie, The Woman King, which is a total farce, misleads people on real history. Special Master holds first meeting with Trump. I want to touch on all of these real quick, but eventually I'm going to head back to CNN's Don Lemon was schooled. I mean, he was schooled the other day by a royal family. I believe she's a historian, and she just schooled him in about a minute. In about a minute, he was asking a question about reparations, and we'll play the audio clip and the video for you if you want to watch the video, because I really want you to see the video, because you can see that he was schooled and he knew it. You could literally see his Adam's apple kind of do that in the video. It's pretty crazy. But I love the fact that Don Lemon is such a fool. I get frustrated every time I see this guy on television just perpetrating lies and being used as a tool by the left. It's just astonishing to me. So we will get to that in just a second. But first, let me just read a couple of headlines. Yesterday, attorneys for President Trump and the DOJ were scheduled to meet yesterday, and they did, in New York, with the court-appointed special master who is reviewing the documents that were seized or stolen. At the word stolen, because that's what I truly believe. I believe this is all another hoax to get Trump, to get him out of the, put him in the spot, destroy a potential candidacy for him. I don't think it's going to work. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon appointed the retired New York judge Raymond Dearie. He was a Reagan appointee, and on Thursday to serve as a special master in the case. The following day, Dearie scheduled a meeting with Trump and the DOJ attorneys for yesterday, and encouraged the two parties to suggest items to this broad, sweeping theft that the FBI performed at Mar-a-Lago. This judge said, listen, give me some specific items, right? According to a court filing that was reviewed by The Hill. Dearie, who has a document review deadline of November 30th, was the only special master that the master candidate, upon which the DOJ and Trump's legal team agreed upon. Meanwhile, the DOJ is still battling to access the allegedly classified documents agents seized from the former president's Florida home, which makes no sense to me. If they want to see the alleged classified document seized, doesn't that mean they didn't really know what was there? Anyway, but we know what this is all about. This was another headline that I think is crucial. I didn't get to go through the latest news on the COVID jab, but here's something that I want you to hear. Former EcoHealth Alliance VP says Fauci funded the group that developed COVID-19. That's right. A former VP of EcoHealth Alliance, a major funder for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, claims that his organization developed SARS-CoV-2 through gain-of-function research that makes viruses dangerous. Rand Paul has been in the Senate, has been doing fabulous. Dr. Fascist Fauci. The process, and I'm quoting, this is Thomas Renz, an attorney here. The process of developing SARS-CoV-2 was also described in detail in the proposal submitted to and ultimately funded by the National Institutes of Health, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, by EcoHealth Alliance, with the North Carolina listed as collaborators. That food packet dated September 12th, posted by Renz, and this is according to the sworn declaration of Andrew Huff, who is represented by the attorney Thomas Renz. So the statement, again, is included in a much larger packet dated September 12th, posted by Renz, who represents clients challenging COVID-19 mandates. Apparently, his name is in the file name. The packet has irregular punctuation and capitalization throughout. Anthony Fauci, and I'm quoting here. This is from the former CDC director, Robert Redfield. He said, and I quote, Anthony Fauci funded the creation, pivotal word, the creation of SARS-CoV-2 and lied to Congress about funding gain-of-function work. Man, Anthony Fauci and others coordinated to cover up the funding of the gain-of-function work that resulted in SARS-CoV-2. Huff is a former U.S. Army infantryman in Iraq and former research fellow in the Department of Homeland Security. He shared the full packet on Twitter, saying it was sent to the U.S. Senate and Congress from Simon and Schuster, the truth about Wuhan. Man, I can't wait to get my hands on that. So Fauci lied, people died. That's what we're finding out. This is why I say this isn't hyperbole. And I want to get into with Don Lemon real quickly here and debunk some of these this notion that America, we were like the preeminent slave traders or something. It's absolutely nonsense. Now, I don't want to make light of slavery. Slavery was an evil practice, evil practice. And I believe that men that practice slavery are gonna or today even are going to account to God, and the indigenous history from the left has to stop because it's preventing America from progressing and making a better society for everyone. So we have to fight back against the false narratives and the revisionist history that people like Don Lemon want to perpetuate. All right, so here's another one. Here's another headline. The Woman King has a black community boycotting it for lies both in and out of the movie. Now, I got to tell you something. I had no idea that there was a movie called The Woman King. I saw sometimes or oftentimes I'm doing research. I'll have the TV on. I'll have the volume completely down. And I've seen the like clips of the movie, but didn't think much of it until Forgotten Man printed this out for me. But it says here, to give you a heads up, The Woman King concerns the story of a real life American kingdom of Dahomey. Dahomey in the early 1800s. The focus is put on an all-female warrior group called the Agoji and their efforts to stop colonialism and slavery. All right. Only that's not what happened in real life. And both the right and many in the black community seem to be finding issues with it. In fact, it spurred the crack. And forgive me, I didn't know what it was about. I should have been up on that. According to Bounding into Comics, many are angry about the portrayal of the main character and her tribe as heroes when really they were brutal enslavers of their fellow Africans. Apparently the movie portrays the Agoji women warriors, as these people that were champions of their people when they were really enslavers of their people. And as a matter of fact, the Dahomey were one of the most prominent slave trading states of their time, trading their own people. Now, they didn't consider them their own people because they were in different tribes. right? But they were people that looked like them. And so they're in this movie, apparently, they're trying to portray these women as, the king really listening to the women and being, sensitive to the women's needs and all that kind of nonsense. And it's just a bunch of BS. But that's what Hollywood does, because Hollywood wants to keep black people mad so that black people will keep voting Democrat. So they keep putting up propaganda. So The Woman King, the movie, is nothing but a bunch of lies and propaganda, which leads me to Don Lemon in this video clip. Gabe, I want to play this real quick, and I wanted to. This lady does a fabulous job of debunking some of this nonsense when it comes to reparations. Gives Don Lemon, just pimp slaps him right on his program. I love it. 4-finger discount across the face. Bow, bow, bow. It was exciting to watch. I loved watching Don Lemon being put in his place, because I do believe that Don Lemon is a propagandist. I really do. I don't say that to be hyperbolic. I really wonder how this guy, it surprises me that this guy has a job on CNN headline news. It makes no sense to me whatsoever, except to say that this is what the left does. The left isn't about getting out true information and informing the public. The left wants to keep the public deceived and entertained and feeling good. CNN has become a propaganda machine. They're trying to turn that around. Not sure that'll happen. Having said that, Gabe, let's go ahead and play the clip of Don Lemon being schooled on his own program.
And you have those who are asking for reparations for colonialism, and they're wondering, $100 billion, $24 billion here and there, $500 million there. Some people want to be paid back, and members of the public are wondering, why are we suffering when you have all of this vast wealth? Those are legitimate concerns.
Well, I think you're right about reparations in terms of, if people want it, though, what they need to do is you always need to go back to the beginning of a supply chain. Where was the beginning of the supply chain? That was in Africa. And across the entire world, when the slavery was taking place, which was the first nation in the world that abolished slavery? The first nation in the world to abolish it. It was started by William Wilberforce, was the British. In Great Britain, they abolished slavery. 2,000 naval men died on the high seas trying to stop slavery. Why? Because the African kings were rounding up their own people. They had them on cages waiting in the beaches. No one was running into Africa to get them. And I think you're totally right. If reparations need to be paid, we need to go right back to the beginning of that supply chain and say who was rounding up their own people and having them handcuffed in cages.
Okay, we can cut it. He had never heard this stuff before. I'm guarantee you that he's never heard of William Wilberforce. I encourage him to read Eric Metaxas's book. And God, I forget the name of Eric Metaxas's book. Is it Amazing Grace? I have it on my bookshelf as a reference book, and I haven't read it in quite some time. But he needs to read that book, or you can watch the movie. Maybe the book was probably titled something different. The movie is called Amazing Grace. I just want to break down debunk some of the myths of slavery here and just add to that conversation. She did a great job smacking down Don Lemon, but suffice it to say, slavery was universal. This is very, very important. The left wants you to believe that America, we were the dominant slave traders, bringing slaves across the Atlantic into the British colonies and all this kind of stuff. And it simply isn't true. Again, that isn't to minimize slavery. Slavery was an evil. I can't say it enough. It was an evil practice. We all know that, right? But it was universal. Everybody practiced it, including what Don Lemon just seemed to find out for the first time, Africans. The whole, what was that? Do you remember what that series was called with Kunta Kinte, Gabe? Roots, this idea that these Europeans were coming on to the coast of Africa and just capturing black slaves with butterfly freaking nets is just asinine. It's more Hollywood, distorting the truth. And I believe that's probably, I need to research that. That was probably Hollywood really trying to distort the truth. Blacks at that particular time. Because I used to believe that. Crap, and it's just nonsense. What happened was, and I'll go through this, but there were just like the woman king. The woman king is trying to lie about. It was people like the Dahomies and these tribes that were capturing and enslaving other African tribesmen and women and selling them to European and others. But here's some of the things that I want to break down. Some of the myths, just real quickly. Michael Medved wrote about this years ago, and it's worth noting. It's worth talking about, because as we go into every election cycle, remember every election cycle, the left wants to use racism, fake racism, in order to maintain the black vote, in order to keep blacks on the Democratic plantation and on Uncle Sam's plantation, right? Ultimately, the Democrat Party is the party of big government. They keep blacks on Uncle Sam's plantation. They can keep control of blacks. But here's the first. Let me go through several of the myths that Medved mentioned, and I'll just go through these quickly. Slavery, number one, slavery was an ancient and universal institution, not a distinctively American innovation. We'll talk about that. Slavery existed only briefly and in limited locales in the history of the Republic, involving only the ancestors of today's Americans. I'll explain that. Though brutal, slavery wasn't genocidal. Live slaves were valuable, but dead captives brought no profit. That's the third thing. That's probably contrary to what you've heard. It's not true. The fourth thing, it's not true that the U.S. became a wealthy nation through the abuse of slave labor. The most prosperous states in the country were those that first freed their slaves. The fifth thing, while America deserves no unique blame for the existence of slavery, the United States merits special credit for its rapid abolition. And then, lastly, there is no reason to believe that today's African Americans would be better off if their ancestors had remained behind in Africa. Let's go through these quickly here. All right, so the first, slavery was an ancient and universal institution, not a distinctively American innovation. And some believe that, let me just read this. At the time of the founding of the Republic in 1776, slavery existed literally everywhere on earth and had been an accepted aspect of human history from the very beginning of organized societies. Some people believe that when humans took a leap towards slavery, at the same time they started domesticating some of the animals, for whether it was for farming or whatever it may have been. Some suggest that was about 10,000 years ago. But here's where I want to go. The Roman, the terms Slav and slave bore the same origins. Just to give you a sense of how universal this was. All of the great cultures of the ancient world, Egypt, Babylonia, Athens, Rome, Persia, India, China, they all depended upon the brutal enslavement of the masses, often representing heavy majorities of populations. It's what all of these nations did. It says here, it's contrary to the glamorization of the Aboriginal New World cultures. This is Native Americans. We all listen, Trail of Tears, all that stuff, evil, evil, evil. But let's not sit here and pretend like Indians were little angels. I can't stand when people distort history. Just tell the truth about history. There's good and bad to history. Just tell the truth. And you can tell the truth about history. You can tell the truth about slavery in America, but you also have to recognize slavery in the context of world history, where America stood with it. So going back to the Native Americans, contrary, it says here, to the counted among the most brutal slave masters of them all, not only turning the members of other tribes into harshly abused beasts of burden, he says, but also using these conquered enemies to feed a limitless lust for human sacrifice. They were brutal. Indians were brutal. They were brutal towards each other. The Tupinamba, a powerful tribe on the coast of Brazil, south of the Amazon, took huge numbers of captives. They humiliated them for months or even years. And then they had cannibalistic feasts. All right. They were brutal. In Africa, going to Africa, slavery also represented a timeless norm. It had existed there from God. We can read the Bible. It had existed there, right? Long before any intrusion by Europeans. Also the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, the British, slave traders rarely penetrated, and they were the biggest slave traders, all right? Portuguese, the Spanish, Dutch, British, they had penetrated, or they rarely penetrated beyond the coast, right? So what did that mean? What does that mean? It goes back to what this historian for the British royal family told capturing other Africans, putting them in cages and selling them right off the coast to other slave traders and slave owners. So this was this is just a fact. In Africa, slavery was just timeless. It says here the actual capture and kidnapping of the millions of victims always occurred at the hands of neighboring tribes. Not sometimes, always. So there weren't Europeans going to Africa, going into somewhere in Middle Africa or something, capturing slaves with butterfly nets. It didn't happen that way. It was always Africans capturing other Africans and selling them off. Why? Because that was the way of the world back then. It's just really important that we understand that. But the concept of the African race was an invention of Western civilization. There's a historian by the name of David Bryan Davis, in a book that he wrote called Inhuman Bondage, The Rise and Fall of Slavery in the New World. It notes that colonial North America received about 5 to 6% of African slaves. So you consider the entire slave trade. I've heard estimates as low as 3%, but let's say that we topped out at 6%. America colonies would have received 6% of the slaves. Meanwhile, the Arab slave trade from the East lasted longer and enslaved more human beings than the European slavers working the other side of the continent. According to the best estimate, Islamic societies shipped between 12 and 17 million African slaves out of their homes in the course of 1,000 years. The best estimate here for the number of Africans enslaved by Europeans amount to 11 million. But when taking the prodigious and unspeakably cruel Islamic enslavement into the equation, at least 97% of all African men, women, and children who were kidnapped, sold, and taken from their homes were sent somewhere else other than the British colonies in North America. 97% of the slave trade didn't affect the British. But all right, let's not lie about this stuff anymore. All right, slavery the second thing, slavery existed only briefly and in limited locales in the history of the Republic, involving a tiny percentage of the ancestors of today's Americans. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution put a formal end to the institution of slavery. We know that, right? So 89 years after the birth of the Republic. So you consider thousands and thousands and thousands of years of slave trading. It comes to America once we form our independence, and we ended in 89 years era, and pretend like we would have done something differently and look at history through the lens of what's occurring today. All you virtual signalers out there. But I guarantee you, if you virtue signal today, you wouldn't have had the moral courage back then to end slavery, because you would have been going against the grain. All right? You would have had to have courage. We had abolitionists that helped form this country. Nobody talks about that. But we had abolitionists. We had John Adams. We had Benjamin Franklin. Several other signers were abolitionists. Even Thomas Jefferson, though he had slaves, he battled with that strongly, and he did consider it an evil. That's why they consider him a benevolent dictator. So slavery ended here relatively quickly as opposed to the rest of the world. The third thing, through brutal slavery, wasn't genocidal. Live slaves were valuable, but dead captives brought no profit. Historians agree that hundreds of thousands and probably millions of slaves perished over the course of 300 years, no doubt about it, during the rigors of the Middle Passage, all right? That was across the Atlantic Ocean. Estimates remain imprecise, but range as high as 1/3 of the slave cargo. Now, in context, historical context, this sounds bad, but if you're going to make a living at slave trading, you got to have slaves to trade. So as horrible as the times were, and again, you're talking hundreds of years ago where they didn't have the modern technology, all this kind of stuff. You know, it's sad, but it's a true statement. All right. They wanted to make as much money as possible. In order to do that, not only did the slaves have to be alive, they needed to be healthy. Territories, particularly when it got to British colonies, they wanted their slaves to be healthy, and sadly, they wanted their slaves to be healthy enough to breed. They wanted to be able to sell more people. I know that sounds disgusting, but that's the way things were. The fourth thing, it's not true that the U.S. became a wealthy nation through the abuse of slave labor. The most prosperous states in the country were those that first freed their slaves. So a lot of people believe, all right, you'll hear a lot of people say this. This is just propaganda. It's wrong, and people want to feel good about themselves. I understand it, but it's just not a fact. When I hear some black people will say, and others will say, hey, well, slaves built this country. No, no. They built the wealth of some very wealthy people in the South at the time. But you have to remember, 80% of people, even in the South, did not own slaves. Didn't want anything to do, I presume, with slaves. And then you had states up north. Pennsylvania passed an emancipation law in 1780. Connecticut and Rhode Island followed 4 years later. New York approved emancipation in 1799. All of these states fared much better than the slave states because they started industrializing. They gave men freedom. And so men became more entrepreneurial there. You can see even today, that's why the jokes are made about the South today. It took a long time for the South. Actually, it's a bunch of Northerners moving down to the South, or people from the West moving to the South like I did. But it took a long time for the South to catch up. Why? Because they were dumbed down, because it was just mostly agriculture and slaves and cotton picking and all of that kind of stuff. So no, they didn't build the country. The rest of the country were building the country, while slave owners were profiting from their slave labor. There's no doubt about it. Those slave owners made a lot of money from slave labor. But did they build America? No, they didn't. And that's why even once we got rid of slavery, it's just common sense. And we had the industrialized revolution. America excelled. It wasn't because of slavery. It was because of entrepreneurship. It was because of manufacturing. It was because of the free market. It was because of capitalism. Now, there's always going to be evil people that take advantage of capitalism, but that's the way of the world. No one's going to get perfect. No one's perfect. No one's ever going to be perfect. You want perfect people, you're going to have to wait and die and go to heaven. All right. Otherwise, all you got to count on is Jesus. And that's it. Another myth: while America deserves no unique blame for the existence of slavery, the United States merits special credit for its rapid abolition. And we've basically already talked through this, but Arab, Portuguese, Spanish, the Dutch, they were the premier slave traders. I mean, overwhelmingly so. Muslims were overwhelmingly so. But America, right from our founding, you had even Thomas Jefferson in an original draft of the Declaration of Independence just talking about the evils of slavery. But in order to unite the nation, he had to get rid of that. So he struggled with that yet again. But relatively quickly on the world stage, we were the nation that, even though Britain was the first to abolish slavery, it happened very quickly in the United States, where considering in the context of history, should it have happened sooner? Yes, we can all say it should have happened sooner. Well, would we have had the courage during that time to do so? Every person that says otherwise is a damn lie. You would have had to go against the grain, not just in America. Slavery was the system of the world. And these virtue signalers want to pretend like they would have stood up and did something when they can't even stand up against their left-wing radical peers. Give me a freak. It would be better off if their ancestors had remained behind in Africa. Now, I got to tell you this. In Liberia, yes, America colonialized Liberia, and it was actually the free area. Let me just read this. The United States sponsored only one long-term venture on the African continent, the colony of Liberia. That was an independent nation set up as a haven for liberated American slaves. So when they talk about American being, colonialist or colonizing Africa, okay, we did Liberia. And Marcus Garvey wanted to take advantage of that. He was like, hey, black people, we need to go back to Africa. Let's go back to Liberia. Ironically, the place where America colonized for people that said, hey, I want to go back to Africa. All right. It's a total scam. It's a total joke. And you can't sit here and say that blacks that are American blacks are not better off than Africans. What Satan intended for evil, God turned to good. Let me say that again. What Satan intended for evil, God turned to good. Blacks are better off being in America. The blacks that are in America are better off. Do you want proof of that? All you have to do is look at how many blacks have moved to America as opposed to, or how many Africans have moved to America as opposed to how many Americans are selling their real estate here to move to Africa. It doesn't freaking happen. And it's not going to happen because we know better. All right. That's just the truth of the matter. All right, guys. That's it for this podcast today. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you catch me again tomorrow. Also, I'll be back on the Officer Tatum Show on Friday. Appreciate Officer Tatum for allowing me to sit in. Please, again, support Mike Lindell, support My Pillow, support this podcast, support Good Rest, support American Manufacturing. Click on the radio listener square, CARL. Also, give them a call, 800-858-0263. Take advantage of those Percale bed sheets on sale, the Giza Dream sheets. Percale bed sheets normally sell for $89.98. Queen size, you get them for $39.98. That's a queen size, but they're available in all sizes, all colors. So just use a promo code and it'll apply. And it'll apply across the board on mypillow.com. Also, you could give them a call if you prefer, 1-800-858-0263. Follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. Subscribe to and like, share, review, rate this podcast, thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, YouTube, Rumble, wherever you find your podcast. Guys, until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.